Thank you so much for coming out. We're going to get started. So I'd like to thank you all for coming out and welcome you to the reenactment of the Vincent Chin trial. My name is Kathy Choi. I'm a second-year student here at the law school.
My name is Alice Wong. I'm also a second-year student at the law school.
Just a brief note, we'll be having a question and answer session with Judge Denny Chin and his wife, Mrs. Kathy Hirata Chin, afterwards, so you can think of questions you're interested in asking them. Just like to take this moment to thank a few people who've made this possible. First, Jane Jung and Felicia Chen. I don't know if you're in this room right now, but you did such a great job. Yay, Jane. You guys did such a great job. Organizing the Asian Pacific American Law Students Association Conference, of which this is a part. I'd like to also thank the Asian American Bar Association of New York, who provided us with these scripts, and they do such a great job producing these scripts, along with Judge Chin and Mrs. Chin every year. I'd also like to thank our affinity group co-sponsors. We've had such a warmth of just a multitude of support from all the different affinity groups on campus, the DOS Student Grant Fund, and all of our cast, whom you'll see today.
So in the 1980s, the Vincent Chin trial and its aftermath sparked a lot of public outcry and catalyzed the Asian American civil rights movement. You'll learn a lot more about the details of the trial in the reenactment. I would also like to thank Dean Sells, our Dean of Students, for all of her support during this process. And without further ado, I'd like to have Dean Sells come up here and say a few words.
Hi, how are you? How are you all? Good, thank you. I'm really very excited and was absolutely delighted to be invited to be a part of this, both as a participant in terms of this production, but also to get a chance to participate in something that someone I've respected for a very long time, Judge Chin. We've sat on some panels when I was still working in New York City, so this project is really quite an amazing one, and it's part of a larger effort in terms of working on making sure that people understand the ideas of how important law is by seeing it through the stories that are made through these court cases, and also the range of issues. I applaud APALSA for taking this on and bringing this to our campus. This is a great way, and I think other groups will also maybe following in your footsteps. I appreciate it. And to the organizers for this whole conference, congratulations on all of your hard work. I know, and now you'll be able to sleep longer hours or go back to more classwork. But I actually do applaud you because this is a major undertaking and truly do appreciate that. And without further ado, we will now hear from Judge Chin talking about the process of developing this project.
We're going to go right into this.
So Judge Chin wants us to go right into the effort. We are going, and he will talk about it afterwards. So without further ado, the murder of Vincent Chin.
This much is certain. On June 19, 1982, just outside Detroit, Vincent Chin, 27 years old, of Chinese ancestry, a working-class American citizen, engaged to be married the following week, went out with friends for a bachelor's party. At a strip club, they encountered two men, Ronald Ebens and his stepson, Michael Nitz. There was an altercation. It continued outside. Sometime later, and a few blocks away, Nitz held Chin down as Ebens swung a baseball bat. The bridegroom's head was split open. Blood, spinal fluid, and cerebral matter pooled onto the pavement beneath him as he collapsed into a coma. Chin died 4 days later.
In state court, Ebens and Nitz faced criminal charges. They accepted a plea bargain. At the sentencing, the prosecutors failed to appear. Judge Charles Kaufman imposed on each man 3 years probation, a $3,000 fine, and court costs. Everything else is disputed. There would be 2 federal criminal trials, a protest movement, and more publicity than had ever been devoted to any incident involving an Asian American. Yet the context, the causes, the consequences of the Vincent Chin case all have been the subject of great controversy. Although the Vincent Chin case has ceased to be infamous, for Asian Americans, it has never stopped being iconic.
The Vincent Chin case is very much a part of our legacy as Asian Americans. This evening, we will explore that legacy by reenacting portions of the court proceedings for you, drawing from the transcripts and court decisions. The words you will hear are the actual words, with minor editing for length.
We begin with the sentencing in Wayne County Circuit Court on March 16, 1983. Ebens and Nitz were charged with second-degree murder, but the prosecutors offered a plea bargain to manslaughter. Both men accepted, with Ebens pleading guilty and Nitz no contest. At sentencing, both men were represented by counsel. As was common at the time because of the high volume of cases and lack of resources in Wayne County, no prosecutor appeared, nor were the victim's family and friends notified. Defense lawyer Bruce Saperstein spoke on behalf of Ebens and argued that Chin was the instigator.
Your Honor, but for the physical assault by the victim in this case, the victim initiating the physical assault, this crime would never have been committed. Mr. Ebens and Mr. Nitz were seated, and the victim walked up and punched Mr. Ebens in the mouth. During the scuffle, Mr. Nitz had his head cut open, was bleeding profusely, and in fact required stitches. Either side, Your Honor, could have been the victim in this case. They could have changed places in this particular case. I think Your Honor would agree in looking at the background. And the background of Mr. Ebens is impeccable. That Mr. Ebens is not a heinous criminal. I don't believe that rehabilitation is even in order in this case. I'm confident this would never happen again. And God knows that these gentlemen would like to see this man back, but we can't change what happened here. With respect to punishment, Your Honor, Mr. Ebens is being punished every day of his life over this incident. He can't change that. He has to live with this. His work background is excellent. 17 years at Chrysler.
Mr. Ebens, do you wish to say something?
Only that I'm deeply sorry about what happened. And if there's any way I could change it, I sure would.
I was looking to see if there's any background on the victim. Do you have any background on him? Did the victim have a criminal record?
I don't have any background on him either way, Your Honor.
Please rise. It is a judgment of this court that each of the defendants be placed on probation for 3 years. In addition, I will require that each of you pay $260 a year, costs at the rate of $25 per month. That each of you pay an additional fine in the amount of $3,000 at the rate of $100 per month. I will leave the question of restitution to civil proceedings.
Judge Kaufman did not explain his reasoning for imposing a sentence of probation, but months later, in an interview, he stated that
these weren't the kind of men you send to jail. You don't make the punishment fit the crime, you make the punishment fit the criminal.
Traditionally, Asian Americans had believed that they should not make waves, and Asian Americans had always been reluctant to discuss race. Asian Americans did not know the language of civil rights, and in the early 1980s, the subject of race was largely black and white. The Asian American community, however, was galvanized by the notion that a Chinese American could be beaten to death because of his race, with his killers sentenced only to probation and a fine. The two men were white auto workers in Detroit. One was out of work at a time when the U.S. auto industry was under tremendous pressure from Japanese imports. Detroit in 1982 was perhaps the hardest place in America to be Asian American. You were the face of the enemy. Anti-Japanese sentiment was at its height. There was taunting, violence, and public displays, including scenes of politicians and union leaders demolishing Japanese imports, that Jap crap, with sledgehammers.
it was against this setting that Asian Americans found cause to speak up. For the first time, Asian Americans crossed ethnic and socioeconomic lines to join together to seek justice for Vincent Chin, led by, among others, attorney Liza Chan, journalist Helen Zia, and Vincent's mother Lily Chin. A number of Asian Americans formed American Citizens for Justice. Their efforts to publicize the case were remarkably successful. The extensive publicity was virtually unanimous in its criticism of the sentence, the judge, the prosecutors, and the two defendants. The case was described as an outrage, the product of racism.
In June 1983, Liza Chan, Lily Chin, and others met with the Justice Department in Washington, D.C. to urge the government to bring federal criminal civil rights charges against Ebens and Nitz. Because of ACJ's efforts, the Justice Department received thousands of letters and signatures on petitions urging it to prosecute Ebens and Nitz. In November 1983, a federal grand jury in Detroit indicted Ebens and Nitz for interfering with Chin's right to use and enjoy a place of public accommodation, the Fancy Pants Lounge, on account of his race and conspiracy to do the same.
The case was assigned to Judge Anna Diggs Taylor, one of the first African American women to be appointed to any federal court in the country. The case was extensively litigated with numerous pretrial motions, including a motion to dismiss the indictment on the grounds the federal civil rights law in question applied only to blacks, and that Orientals, who were considered by many to be white, were not protected. There was also a motion to change venue because of the adverse pretrial publicity. Both motions were denied.
Trial commenced on June 5, 1984. It was undisputed that Ebens and Nitz killed Vincent Chin, but there was sharp dispute over the issue of motivation. The government had to prove Ebens and Nitz acted because of Chin's race. We turn now to the opening statements from United States versus Ronald Ebens and Michael Nitz, the first of the two federal trials. Theodore Merritt from the Justice Department opened for the government, while defense attorney David Lawson spoke for Ebens.
May it please the court, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. The evidence will show that on June 19, 1982, a brutal crime was committed on the streets in Highland Park. On that night, the defendant, Ronald Ebens, helped by his co-defendant, Michael Nitz, repeatedly beat with a baseball bat a Chinese-American citizen of the United States by the name of Vincent Chin, and beat him so bad that he died 4 days later from massive head injuries. And the evidence will prove that Vincent Chin died at the hands of these defendants because he was Chinese American and because he was enjoying the public entertainment of a bar. The evidence will show that this fatal assault was preceded an hour or so earlier by a confrontation at that bar between Vincent Chin and the defendants. The confrontation was caused by Ronald Ebens' barrage of obscenities, baiting, and racial insults directed at Vincent Chin. What happened in Highland Park that night was a story of ugly racism turned violent.
Now, the burden is on the government to prove not only that Ronald Ebens and Michael Nitz were responsible for the death of Vincent Chin, but to show that they killed Vincent Chin because of his race, and with the intent to deny his right to use the Fancy Pants Lounge. Now, we do not believe that the evidence will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Ebens acted because of Vincent Chin's race. We believe the evidence will show that this was not a civil rights case, but a fight between angry and intoxicated men that ended in the death of one of them.
Lawson gave Ebens' version of the altercation. He also attacked the government's witnesses and suggested the issue of race was a fabrication.
The witnesses will tell you that Ebens was in an outrage, and he began swinging the bat at Vincent Chin. The bat struck Mr. Chin several times, including the head, the neck, and other parts of his body. Mr. Chin fell in the street with a mortal wound to his head, and he died 4 days later. As a result, Ronald Ebens was charged with murder. He pleaded guilty in the Wayne County Circuit Court to manslaughter. Then something happened in that court on March 16, 1983, which set off a chain of events which has resulted in this trial today. And that was that Ron Ebens got probation for killing Vincent Chin. Naturally, such a sentence in a case such as this upset and enraged Mr. Chin's family and friends, and also members of the community. And you will hear evidence that after the sentence of probation, Mr. Chin's family, friends, and others met and tried to come up with some evidence that would turn this homicide into a federal matter. We expect that the government will try every opportunity to inject some evidence of racial sayings or racial acts into the case. Because of the massive publicity in this case, because of the influence placed on the witnesses, because of the strong beliefs held by some members of the community that there was evidence to support the government's charges, we expect that the testimony of the witnesses will be distorted or changed to support the government's charges.
One of the most important witnesses was Racine Caldwell, one of the dancers at the Fancy Pants Lounge. As one of the jurors revealed in a post-trial interview, Caldwell was seen as a neutral witness who had no reason to lie. Her testimony was critical on the issue of motivation.
Where are you employed, Ms. Caldwell?
Fancy Pants.
Now, Ms. Caldwell, let me ask you to direct your attention to the night of June 19th, 1982. Were you working at the Fancy Pants?
Yes, I was.
And did you see Vincent Chin in the Fancy Pants that night?
That evening, yes.
And what was his mood when you saw him?
He was laughing and joking.
Now, did you dance that night?
Yes, I did.
And did you see Vincent and his friends while you were dancing?
Yes, I did.
How long did you dance anyway?
Approximately 12 minutes.
And how was Vincent acting while you were up on the stage?
Happy and laughing.
Now, what did you do after you finished dancing?
I got off stage, went back to freshen up in the dressing room, and then I came back out to talk to customers.
And did anything happen while you were out there talking to the customers?
Yes, I came close to a couple of people that was loud talking, like arguing, and I turn around and I see Vincent and a couple of people arguing.
And do you see the man in the courtroom today you saw arguing with Vincent?
Yes.
And can you point him out if you can?
He has on the blue suit, blue tie, and light blue shirt.
And what did you hear the defendant say?
All I heard him say when I turned around was, "It's because of you little motherfuckers that we're out of work."
And after you heard that, what else did you hear?
Well, Vincent came back with a remark like, "I'm not a little motherfucker." Then it was stated to him, "Well, I'm not sure if you're a big or little motherfucker." And then at that time, he got mad.
And who said that to Vincent?
The gentleman over there.
Did you hear Vincent make any comments directed at the defendant?
No other than, "I'm not a little motherfucker."
Did he ever call the defendant anything?
Not that I heard, no.
In what tone of voice was the defendant talking to Vincent?
A loud tone of voice.
And what happened then?
He pushed him on the shoulder, you know, kind of hard, and he pushed him. And then they got into a fight. And the younger fellow jumped into it and started helping him.
And who's that?
That's the gentleman that's helping the older man when he started hitting Vince.
And did you subsequently learn his name?
Yes, Michael Nitz.
David Lawson cross-examined for Mr. Ebens.
Mr. Ebens was speaking in a loud tone of voice?
Like an argument, like if I was arguing with someone.
Was he shouting?
Yeah, you could hear him over the music.
Now, when he was shouting, what did you hear him shout?
Because of you little motherfuckers, we're all out of work.
And then Vincent responded?
I am not a little motherfucker.
Okay, now, when you were making the rounds and talking to customers, is that part of the business also?
Yes.
And were you soliciting customers?
No, I was not.
Were you asking them if they wanted a lap dance?
No.
Vincent was a friend of yours?
A customer, not a personal friend. No.
But you liked him.
Sure.
And you liked to see him come in?
Yeah.
Another important witness was Jimmy Choi. He and two other of Vincent's friends, Gary Koivu and Bob Sarosky, were celebrating with Vincent that night. On direct examination, Choi described the events leading up to the bachelor party and then testified about the encounter with Ebens and Nitz.
How loud was the music on that stage?
It wasn't blasting, but it was Just the volume was normal.
So you could carry on a conversation with the person next to you?
Yes, Gary.
And what about the people who were across the stage from you? Could you hear what they were saying in the conversation?
No, I didn't pay too much attention at first. Then I heard a few things.
What did you hear, and where did that come from?
I was in the bar for about 15, 20 minutes. And then I heard someone mention foreign cars from across the stage. I didn't pay too much attention, just glanced around and resumed talking to Gary.
Did you hear anything else coming from that side of the stage?
Then I heard Vincent saying something first, okay? He was talking across the stage.
And did you hear any other statements from the men again from across the stage?
Yes. I heard the word nipped calling toward our direction. And I recall Vincent saying that we're not Japanese.
So that's what you meant when you referred to when you understood them to mean...
I understood it to be slang for Japanese.
Now, when you looked over and you saw, well, did you see who was making the statements?
Yes.
Do you see him in the courtroom?
Yes.
Can you point him out?
Yes.
May the record reflect the witness had identified defendant Evans.
It reflects. Thank you.
Now, when you looked over, was he looking over on your side of the table when he said nips?
Yes, across in our direction.
Now, did there come a time when you heard some more words exchanged across the table?
Yes. I heard Vincent say in a loud voice, "Don't call me a motherfucker. I'm not a motherfucker."
And then what?
Then I heard the gentleman say, "Big fucker, little fucker, we're all fuckers."
What happened after he made that statement?
Vincent kept on saying, "Don't call me a motherfucker." And then he got mad and said, "Come on, let's go outside."
And what did Vincent do?
Vincent got up, he came around the stage, went over to where the two gentlemen were sitting. The man with the gray hair stood, and Vincent punched him.
And then what happened?
Then they started exchanging blows.
Choi continued to describe the scuffling in the bar, and then he moved on to what happened outside.
And what did they do?
They just went to the car, lifted the hatchback, and pulled out a baseball bat.
Did you see which one got the baseball bat?
The man there.
The man you identified as Mr. Evans?
Yes.
And what did he do when he got the baseball bat?
He started in not a run, something like a trot, holding the bat like this. And Vincent said, "I'm not going to fight you with a baseball bat." Then they kept on coming. So Vincent ran away from them.
And they pursued Vincent?
Yes, they did.
Choi explained that Evans and Nitz were unable to catch Chin. They returned and asked the other two members of their group, Gary Koivu and Bob Sarosky, "Where is your friend?" Choi testified that when Evans and Nitz saw him, they said, "Let's get this little fucker." At that point, Choi ran away as well. He eventually found Vincent, and the two stopped at a parking lot in front of a McDonald's. We continue with Choi's direct testimony.
Then what happened?
Well, we were still sitting. Then all of a sudden, I heard Vincent say, "Scram." I turned around, and I saw the two men right behind us, 3 to 5 steps.
And then what did you do?
Well, I scrammed. I ran towards north of the McDonald's right off the bat.
And how far did you run?
30 yards, then I turned back.
What'd you see?
I saw Vincent running across, just about getting to the median of the cars. Then the younger man came up and tried to grab him from behind, pull him around. Then they were scuffling, and the older man came up with the bat.
And what did you see when he approached Vincent with the bat?
He approached. Vincent was still trying to get away from him, and then the older man, he couldn't run too fast. He kind of hobbled, and he took a swing at Vincent's knees.
And then what happened?
At that point, on his knees, one swing, upper section on Vincent. And he blocked like this.
And then what happened? What did you see Vincent doing?
Well, he was going down slowly like this, and the old man took a swing right at his head.
What did you do?
Well, I don't know. I was like I couldn't believe it. I was like, I can't believe this.
And what else did you see?
It seems like slow motion. Vincent was going down. Then I saw another blow. Then he was kind of in a crawling position like this. And then it was like in a frenzy, like while he was swinging, he was saying something, which I couldn't hear. He kept mumbling.
How many times did you see him swing the bat?
The first blow, I saw it very, very vividly.
And where did that blow land?
Right here.
And after that?
One more blow to the head while Vincent was going down. He kept swinging, and I don't know whether it was connecting or not, but I couldn't believe it.
And what did you do?
Well, I ran back. I just ran toward the direction, right towards Vincent.
And what did you see when you got there?
All of a sudden, I saw guns, service guns. And then I stopped abruptly, and I saw a man holding the gun. He pulled out a badge like that and told the other man to drop the bat.
Now, when you went over to Vincent, was he conscious?
He was still conscious.
Was he saying anything?
Yes. I cradled his head. And I said, "Hey, Vincent, are you all right?" And he was saying, "Fight. Fight. It's not fair."
Was he speaking Chinese?
In Chinese.
And then what did you do?
I said, "Somebody get a bloody ambulance." I didn't see anyone move, so I went into the McDonald's and I called the ambulance.
And then did you go back outside?
Yes. I ran straight to Vincent.
And was he still conscious?
He was still conscious. And then I said, "Okay, Vincent." I shook his hand. "Snap up. Snap up. Snap up. The ambulance will be right here." I was holding his hand all that time.
Now, did you travel with him in the ambulance?
Yes, I did.
And did you say anything to defendants before you got into the ambulance?
Yes. I saw them talking to the police officers, saying something like, "I didn't mean to hurt this boy," and he said, my son's hurt. I was totally outraged. I said, "If I had a gun, I would shoot you right here."
And then you got in the ambulance.
Yes.
One of defense counsel's principal themes on cross-examination was that Choi had been unduly influenced by others. Choi and other witnesses had met as a group before trial with Liza Chan, the attorney who helped form American Citizens for Justice. Chan met with the witnesses to prepare them for their testimony. The meetings were recorded, and the recordings were transcribed. Defense counsel wanted to introduce the recordings into evidence to show that the witnesses colluded to come up with evidence that race was a motivating factor. The government objected to the tapes as hearsay. Judge Taylor sustained the objection, although she permitted defense counsel to confront a witness with his own words on that tape, but only his own words. She ruled that Liza Chan's statements to the witnesses could be introduced only through her and only if she were called to the stand. Frank Eman, one of Ebens's attorneys, cross-examined Choi.
Well, you have been asked a lot of questions by a lot of people before coming to court today.
Yes.
And one of those people was Liza Chan.
Yes.
Now, you met with several people about what happened at the Fancy Pants Lounge, and that included the meeting with Liza Chan in April, with the FBI in May, and with Liza Chan again in May. Do you remember those meetings?
Yes, I do.
And you knew at each of those meetings that the FBI was investigating a civil rights violation.
Exactly.
And you knew, did you not, that the investigation was not about whether those men did what they did?
Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Choi does not know what the point of the investigation was. His question has no foundation.
Your Honor, it goes to the witness's state of mind.
Overruled.
Now, you knew, did you not, that the investigation was whether these men were motivated in doing this act because of your friend's race?
I object again, Your Honor. Mr. Choi did not know what the investigation was, and the investigation did not have any particular aim in its course.
Mr. Choi may answer the question. This is cross-examination.
Did you know that?
I had a vague idea.
A vague idea?
Yes.
Sir, you knew that it was significant whether any racial remarks were made inside the fancy pants. Did you know the significance of that?
I knew the significance, but I did tell the truth.
Choi acknowledged that he did not recall using racial terms when he had spoken earlier to Liza Chan and the FBI. In trying to explain why not, Choi echoed certain familiar themes. Asian Americans do not make waves. Asians do not complain of discrimination. And Asians do not use race as an excuse.
And can you explain then why you met with Liza Chan in April and why you did not tell her that you heard the word nip?
Okay, because that was when the prosecution at the state level, okay, ended. I was in Toronto for my internship. I got back. I didn't know what happened. And all of a sudden, this lady lawyer came to me. I wasn't prepared, not as much as I wanted to be. I don't ever want to mention discrimination, and she was going for the criminal portion of the case. She didn't ask me about discrimination. As I thought about it, more things popped up to me.
Since April of 1983, the more you thought about it, the more these remarks have popped up?
It depends. It all depends on what's popped up in my memory. All of a sudden, little things, few things came to me.
Well, let me just clear up, if I might. When you met with Liza Chan in April of 1983, you knew that was after these men were sentenced to probation.
I knew that, yes.
Do you remember Liza Chan asking you, nobody actually heard anything. I mean, actually heard how it started. What started it? And in answering, I would believe that Ebens might have made a smart-ass remark. Do you remember telling her that?
Yes.
And I guess you were telling us that today, in April of 1983, that you didn't remember that the word nip had been used.
Yes.
Okay, do you remember also at that interview in April of 1983 being asked by someone, besides that, did they say anything like Chinaman and things like that type of thing, just the four-letter word? And in telling them, I had not heard that. I don't think that they made any racial remarks. Nothing. Did you tell Liza Chan that?
Yes, I did.
Now, when you met with the FBI agent in May, you did not remember yet that the word nip had been used.
No.
Mr. Choi, am I correct that the first time you mentioned the use of the word nip was before the grand jury?
Yes.
At these meetings that you had with other witnesses, do you remember with Gary Koivu and Bob Starosky?
Well, we had a meeting. Yes, we did.
And you each talked about what each of you had seen and heard that evening.
Yes, we did.
And do you remember what you asked Gary? Whether he heard you say anything about, we are not Japanese?
I can't recall. That was a year and a half ago. This is just like 3 conversations. Everyone was talking. We were like, what do you remember? Well, do you remember that? And that's the extent of the meeting.
Now, some people didn't remember some things.
Yes, and a few things, okay? Somebody said, okay, well, you did that. And I said, yes, well, I remember that. Yes, I kind of have an idea now.
Well, was the purpose of the meeting to get the stories together for this case?
No, sir.
Now, did you receive advice from anyone about what parts of the story to tell and what parts not to tell?
I didn't receive any advice to that effect. I was told to tell the whole truth.
Don't you believe that Vincent got angry and overly reacted?
I don't think he overly reacted.
Didn't you tell Liza Chan that, in your opinion, he overly reacted? Will you look at page 11 of the transcript?
Let me think. if I did, I made a mistake. He didn't overly react. He tried to ignore any racial remarks. We tried.
I'm referring to right here.
Oh. Did I say that?
You do recall saying that then?
I read it, yes.
Now, at the time you said that, you were describing to Liza Chan in April events which, to the best of your memory, were completely devoid of racial provocation.
Well, there was a time, okay, for Chinese. We try not to, shall I say, react. Usually we can take a lot of things. There was a time when I was just asked, basically in the bar, how did he grab him? How did he swing the bat? And she wasn't really looking for racial remarks. If you go there, it wasn't a very good place to go in the first place. I didn't want to do anything. Plus, I tried to shun all racial things away from me. I had a few experiences, mostly when I dealt with my classmates at school, but a few times when somebody drives by and told me chink, and I tried to brush it aside.
After the government rested, the defendants put on a brief defense case. Ebens chose to testify.
Mr. Ebens, what happened when you sat down at the bar?
Sat down. I think I got one sip of the glass of beer, and this black dancer was dancing. And I remember comments coming from across the stage directed at her and telling her what a crummy dancer she was, okay?
Did you see who was making these comments?
I really don't know who was making those comments.
You know they were coming from across the stage, however.
Yeah.
What did you do then?
I don't like seeing people picked on, for a starter.
What did you do?
I made a comment to the effect that don't worry about those guys, just show them what a good dancer is.
Did you direct these comments to anybody in particular?
No, just the dancer.
Did you say anything else?
Not at the time that I remember.
When you made those comments, do you recall referring to the people across the stage using the term fucker or motherfucker?
I don't remember distinctly.
Could you have said that?
Yeah, I could have.
Do you or have you ever used words like that before?
Many times.
Is that language unusual to you?
No, it's not.
When you used those words, if you did, was it your intention to insult anyone or provoke anyone?
No.
What happened next?
I remember at this point the Oriental that was sitting the second from the end saying something to the man on his left, which I couldn't pick up, okay? And he got up.
Okay, at that point, did you notice that he was an Oriental person?
I probably did.
Do you recall the testimony in this court that Vincent Chin stood up and said, "Don't call me a motherfucker"?
Yep.
Do you recall hearing that in the bar that night?
Not distinctly, no.
Do you recall hearing it at all?
No, I don't.
Do you recall testimony in court that you stood up and said, "Big fuckers, little fuckers, we're all fuckers"? Do you remember that testimony?
Yep.
Did you say that?
I don't remember saying it.
Could you have said it?
I could have said it.
When you saw the person say something to the other gentleman on his left, what is the next thing that happened after that?
I really didn't pay much attention to him. I was watching the dancer. He proceeded around, and I guess the next time I was really aware of him was when I turned around and he was standing directly in front of me.
What happened then?
He punched me.
Up to that point, did you call him, or anyone else for that matter, the word chink?
No.
Do you recall calling anyone a nip?
No.
Do you recall saying anything about being out of work or words to that effect?
Nope.
Did you say those words?
No.
We move to Ebens' testimony that he and Nitz were driving in their car when they saw Vincent and Jimmy Choi outside a McDonald's.
All right, what happened next?
As we drove by, Michael seen him sitting out front on the steps, whatever it was out there, and sitting there laughing, and it must have been real funny to them.
How did you feel at this point?
Angry?
Why?
Same reason, I guess. The man had sucker punched me, and he was responsible for splitting Mike's head open. I just was angry.
What did you do?
I told Mike to park the car.
And when you got out of the car, did you have the bat with you?
Yeah.
And what did you do then?
I ran around to where they were sitting, and I hollered at them.
Then what did you do?
I said, "You sons of bitches."
And then what did you do?
They jumped up and started to run, and I was on top of them and took a swing and caught Chin in the arm.
You took a swing with the bat.
Yes, sir.
You caught him in the arm.
Yes.
And what happened then?
And I more or less just stopped because they took off running.
And what happened then?
Mike came around. He caught Chin in the middle of the lane of traffic out there.
What did you do then?
When I seen Mike scuffling, it flashed in my mind. He's going to get hurt again. And I started toward him, and something just snapped. I don't remember from there on what did happen.
Did you hit Mr. Chin?
Not that I remember.
Were you trying to kill Mr. Chin, Mr. Evans?
No.
Do you remember what you were trying to do?
No, I don't.
And what is the next thing you remember?
I remember looking up and seeing a revolver pointed at me and a man saying, "Drop the bat."
The prosecution cross-examined.
Well, Mr. Evans, you told us a lot about that night, but now you claim you can't remember it and you blacked out. Is that your testimony?
That's correct.
Let me show you Government Exhibit 14. Is this the bat you used to kill Vincent Chin?
I can't tell you that. I don't know.
Can you show how you were holding this bat when you asked Gary and Bob, "Where's your friend?"
I can't tell you that. I don't know.
Now, when you were in the car saying, "When I catch those Chinese guys, I'm going to bust their heads," you hadn't blacked out then yet, had you?
I never said that.
When you found Vincent Chin and said, "There they are," you hadn't blacked out then, had you?
I don't know.
So only when you caught up to Vincent Chin and started swinging the bat at him, that is when you blacked out. Is that your testimony?
Just prior to it.
You can't remember hitting Vincent Chin in the head so hard he couldn't run away?
No.
You don't remember hitting him in the arms?
No.
You don't remember hitting him in the chest, shoulder, and face?
No, I can't remember.
You can't remember hitting him in the head as he lay there lying on the ground?
No, I can't.
You can't remember telling the police that you are sorry, but look at what they did to your son. And you do remember that, don't you?
Not really.
You had the presence of mind to think of an explanation, didn't you?
I don't remember being asked for an explanation.
Mr. Evans, maybe if you would take this bat, you would remember.
Objection. I think we've had enough with the bat, and I think it is meant to harass the witness.
Ask a question, counselor. That wasn't a question.
Yes, all right. Mr. Evans, have you ever chased a man because of a drunken fight and beat him to death?
No. Well, outside of this time, only Vincent Chin.
And because he looked like Vincent Chin. Is that right, Mr. Evans?
No, it's not right.
The lawyer summed up on June 26, 1984, focusing on the issue of motivation.
There really is only one explanation for Vincent Chin's brutal murder that night. In the minds of Ronald Ebens and Michael Nitz, Vincent Chin was a chink who dared to stand up to them. Vincent Chin and his friends were having a good time, spending a lot of money, and that bothered Ronald Ebens. And Ronald Ebens began a barrage of racial insults, obscenities directed at Chin's mother. He was talking about foreign cars, and because of you motherfuckers, we in the auto industry are out of work. But ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you don't have to decide that Ronald Ebens and Michael Nitz acted with any racial intent, just on the basis of derogatory remarks. Rather, examine what they did, and you will be convinced why they did it. When they walked into the Fancy Pants Lounge that night, they could only know two things about Vincent Chin: that he was Oriental, and that he was having a good time. They, of course, had never met Vincent before. They saw only an Oriental acting flamboyant, spending a lot of money. And how do you think Ronald Ebens reacted to that? The racial animal inside Ronald Ebens had been unleashed, and now his prey was anything Oriental. The brutality and the ferocity of the attack on Vincent Chin tell you this was no mere ballroom brawl that got out of hand. And Michael Nitz got Mr. Chin in a beer hug, Ebens' savage and repeated use of that bat. Even after Chin lay motionless on the ground, cannot be explained by mere anger or revenge. The defendants are wrong in saying that this was nothing more than some barroom fight. This was violent hatred turned loose. This was years of pent-up racial hostilities and rage unleashed. This was a modern-day lynching, but there was a bat instead of a rope.
Defense counsel argued that the issue of race was a fabrication.
How did this tragic incident become infused with race? Meetings with witnesses began to take place, and into this scenario of intoxicated violence, witnesses began to inject, as Jimmy Choi says, their thoughts and ideas and images of possible racist motivations. A transformation of facts occurs because people went back to take a second look at what happened to see if they could come up with any evidence to support a second prosecution. Suddenly, when Vincent Chin said, "I'm not a motherfucker," it was in response not to simply being called a motherfucker, but instead to being called a chink, a nip, to some reference about being out of work in foreign cars. What had never been a racial incident became one. And it became one gradually. That's why we have 3 different racial allegations by 3 different people surfacing at 3 different times. People worked hard with each other and their attorneys, searching the dark recesses of their minds to find something, anything that can make this a racial event. Vincent Chin was the same as Ronald Ebens, a human being. He was not a person who had only great virtues and no faults. Vincent Chin got drunk and went to nude bars and started a fight and then wanted to finish a fight. And Mr. Ebens, like Vincent Chin, became full of rage, and Mr. Ebens wanted revenge. Vincent Chin wanted to finish the fight. Does this make him a hero or a martyr? None of this happened to Vincent Chin because of his race.
On June 28, 1984, the jury returned its verdict.
Will the foreman please rise? Mr. Foreman, do you have a unanimous verdict for each of the counts as to each of the 2 defendants?
We have, Your Honor.
Will the clerk please read the verdict?
In the case of United States of America versus Ronald Ebens and Michael Nitz, the verdict form reads as follows. We, the jury, find the defendant Michael Nitz not guilty as to count 1 and not guilty as to count 2. We, the jury, find the defendant Ronald Ebens not guilty as to count 1 and guilty as to count 2.
The jury thus found Ebens guilty of violating the civil rights of Vincent Chin on account of his race. He was sentenced on September 18, 1984. After hearing from defense counsel, Judge Taylor gave Ebens an opportunity to be heard, and then, without elaboration, she tersely announced her sentence.
Mr. Ebens, is there anything you'd like to say?
Only, Your Honor, I have expressed my regret and remorse on several occasions, and I would just like to reiterate that one more time. I'm sorry for what happened. I can't say any more than that. At this point, I have no recourse but to depend on the American system of justice and on you, Your Honor.
Is that all? It is adjudged, Mr. Ebens, that you are committed to the custody of the Attorney General for the term of 25 years. It will be recommended that you be committed to an institution where you may receive treatment for alcohol abuse.
Ebens appealed to the United States Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. Circuit Judge Albert J. Engel issued the court's decision on September 11, 1986. The court addressed several issues, including Ebens' argument that the federal civil rights law in question did not extend to Orientals. The court rejected this argument, holding that the statute protected any person because of his race, color, religion, or national origin from intimidation or interference in the enjoyment of public accommodations. Citing Yickwo v. Hopkins, Judge Engel wrote,
Orientals come within the broad constitutional protections of the 14th Amendment, even though the original thrust of the amendment was primarily motivated by concern for the rights of black persons.
Judge Engel also rejected the argument that Judge Taylor erred in refusing to transfer the case because of the pretrial publicity.
We have carefully reviewed the extensive record made of the publicity in the case and agree that it was indeed pervasive. The nearly unanimous public judgment that Ebens and his stepson should have received jail terms, and the harsh criticism of the state trial judge, followed by the federal prosecution of defendants based upon the same incident, were bound to lead to a strong public impression that justice had not been done in the state court, and that it was incumbent upon the federal government to right that wrong by a second prosecution. While it probably would have been advisable for the trial judge to have ordered a change of venue, we conclude that there was not reversible error for the trial judge to proceed to impanel the jury.
Ultimately, however, the Sixth Circuit held that Ebens was denied a fair trial. The court concluded that Judge Taylor had erred in allowing a witness to testify about racist remarks about blacks purportedly made by Ebens some 10 years earlier. The court also strongly disapproved of what it described as inflammatory language by the prosecution in summation. The court was most troubled, however, by Judge Taylor's ruling not to allow the defense to introduce the tape recordings of the meetings Liza Chan had with the witnesses.
Ebens and co-defendant Nitz sought to introduce into evidence tape recordings of interviews which had been conducted by Liza Chan with these witnesses. The defense purpose was to demonstrate that the witnesses' testimony concerning Ebens' racist statements was false, and that it was the result of improper coaching of them by Chan in preparation for the trial. Each time the defendant sought to introduce the tapes, however, the court sustained the government's objection on hearsay grounds. The government concedes that these rulings were erroneous. We unanimously conclude that a consideration of the relevant factors mandates reversal. Ebens should have been permitted to introduce into evidence the entire contents of the tapes. The three witnesses were the most crucial of all witnesses for the government. It is true that the district court permitted the defense to elicit a few of the statements, but it was not within the province of the court's proper discretion to prevent the jury from hearing the tapes themselves and judging for themselves the impact upon the witnesses which the purported conversation had, and measuring that against the statements made in court by the witnesses.
The Court of Appeals was so troubled by what it heard on the tapes that it included, as an appendix to its decision, excerpts from the meeting of Liza Chan and Choi, Koivu, and Sarosky on May 17, 1983. Liza Chan was only 3 years out of law school at the time, and she was not a litigator. She met with the witnesses as a group, and she recorded the conversations. We reenact portions of the meeting for you now.
So the purpose of this meeting tonight is so we can help each other remember exactly what happened, how it happened, what had happened, and when, and all the minor details. I was talking this afternoon with the parking lot attendant, the black guy. According to his version of the facts, it's quite different from what I have so far understood them to be. So I would center on what you, the three of you, say they are, and somehow try to fit in all the facts around these. We will agree this is the story, this is it. When it's a federal prosecution, we're all going to have to be agreeing on this is what happened. Now, if you don't agree, like if you definitely remembered certain things happened, say it's a black car and you definitely remember it's a white car, and we kind of have, okay, other than that, let's all have it sort of down, like have it down pat. Is it 5 minutes or is it 10 minutes? Is it more like 8 minutes? So let's all agree. Otherwise, you all look funny on the stand. You all supposedly were there.
Well, is there any harm in getting too accurate? Because they could say, well, you all rehearsed this. Like, if you're in court and we all have exactly the same times.
Well, as long as you're within, you could say 8:10, you could say 8:20. I mean, that doesn't really matter.
Right, but as long as they have an example.
Right, but as far as the crucial facts are not conflicting. So I'll give you an example. I mean, you can't say that we stayed at Fancy Pants for 2 hours and another person says we stayed at Fancy Pants for half an hour. I mean, that's a big discrepancy there.
Right.
So at some point, Vincent started out of the chair?
Yeah.
He ran over.
Yeah.
So that's, you remember?
Yeah, that's why I remember just before I got up, he says, "Don't call me a motherfucker." I remember that.
Okay, so we all remember our different lines, okay? There's no agreement. That's fine. Just remember your different lines.
Right.
So, chink, foreign cars, big fucker, little fucker, all fuckers, don't call me a fucker. We all remember our lines, okay? I could be wrong. So he said, I just don't know whether you're a big fucker or a little fucker, because he had earlier said big fuckers, little fuckers, we're all fuckers.
Maybe that's how they thought they heard that.
So I just don't know whether you're a big one or a little one.
Right. Yeah, could be.
Okay.
But after I tapped Vincent and Eben said, "I just don't know if you're a big or little fucker," that's when Vincent said, "I told you I'm not a fucker, friend."
Did anybody hear that?
I didn't hear it, but, he's talking to him, and, I might have saw him point out the window, but no, I can't say something like that.
I think I heard him say, "Nobody calls me a motherfucker."
I can't even say that.
The record contained other evidence that race was a motivating factor, evidence that was not tainted, even arguably, by the Liza Chan meeting. For example, Racine Caldwell, the Fancy Pants dancer, testified that Evans yelled at Vincent, "It's because of you little motherfuckers that we're out of work." Jimmy Perry, a bystander near the Fancy Pants lounge, testified that he was given $20 by Nitz and Evans to help them find 2 Chinese guys so that they could bust their heads. And, as the prosecution argued, the brutality and ferocity of the attack was proof that this was not just another barroom brawl, but an attack driven by race and bigotry. The Sixth Circuit reversed the judgment of conviction and remanded the case to Judge Taylor for a new trial. On remand, Evans renewed his motion for a change of venue because of the adverse publicity. This time, Judge Taylor granted the motion. She observed that there had been even more publicity about the case since the first trial.
Most damaging of all the post-reversal coverage in the view of this court was the October 12th, 1986 Detroit News Sunday magazine cover story on the victim's mother, Lily Chin. The magazine cover was accompanied by more photographs. The magazine cover was comprised of a full-page color photograph of the still grieving mother. The lengthy story inside, accompanied by more photographs, told of the tragic deterioration of her life to that of a homeless wanderer since the death of her son. The effect of this major feature alone in the newspaper of largest circulation in Michigan and northern Ohio is extremely prejudicial to the court's ability to secure an impartial jury in this area. Moreover, the leadership of this community, including the president and members of the Detroit City Council, who declared a day of mourning in honor of Vincent Chin and presented a memorial to his mother, have been quoted by the news media uniformly to the effect that the defendant must be punished. Editorial comment, both broadcast and press and letters to the editor, continue strenuously and unanimously to stress the fact that the defendant has never been punished.
Judge Taylor ordered a transfer of the case to the Southern District of Ohio, the federal court in Cincinnati. Ironically, the Asian American community's success at publicizing the injustice to Vincent Chin was a factor in causing the transfer of the case from Detroit, a city with a black majority and a history of civil rights, caught in the economic woes afflicting the automotive industry, to Cincinnati, a city known for its southern sensibilities. Indeed, during jury selection in Cincinnati, Only 19 of more than 200 prospective jurors said they had ever met an Asian American. In addition to the different demographics of the jury pool, the prosecution team faced several new challenges. With memories fading, its witnesses would have to testify to 5-year-old events. More impeachment material existed in the form of testimony from the first trial. Evidentiary rulings that had gone the government's way the first time had been reversed. And Ebens, whose selective memory had not impressed the jury when he testified in Detroit, did not take the stand in the second trial. It was no surprise then when on May 1, 1987, the jury returned a verdict in the Cincinnati courtroom finding Ronald Ebens not guilty of violating Vincent Chin's civil rights.
The Cincinnati jury was not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that Ebens' actions were motivated by Vincent Chin's race. Was race a factor? Ebens steadfastly denied that he was motivated by Vincent Chin's race, and in post-trial interviews, he continued to deny that he was a racist. Perhaps Ebens was not a hardcore racist, but racism is more ambiguous, complex, and subtle. Clearly, the mix of the recession, alcohol, testosterone, and tempers was a lethal combination. Perhaps Ebens was not a racist in the conventional, simple sense, but he may very well have been motivated by racial impulses that he was only dimly aware of, if at all. As he put it in trying to explain his actions, something snapped, and the brutality of his actions led to the death of Vincent Chin.
What is the legacy of Vincent Chin? Despite the disappointment of many in the final verdict, the Vincent Chin case had a great impact, both on the administration of justice in general and on the Asian American community in particular. The Vincent Chin case sparked a public discourse on the practice of Wayne County prosecutors not to appear for sentencing proceedings. The case showed how important it was for prosecutors to participate in sentencings and for victims and their families to be given notice of court proceedings. In the years following the Vincent Chin case, federal and state laws, including in Michigan, were enacted giving victims greater rights. And in the discussions leading to the passage of hate crime laws, the Chin case was often cited. The Vincent Chin case also highlighted the need for reform in sentencing and plea bargaining. Within a month after Judge Kaufman sentenced Ebens and Nitz to probation, the Wayne County prosecutor announced a ban on manslaughter plea bargains and murder prosecutions. On the federal level, the Sentencing Reform Act was passed in 1984 in an effort to reduce disparities in sentencing. As for Asian Americans, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals held that, indeed, Asian Americans were protected by this country's civil rights laws. The murder of Vincent Chin and its aftermath awakened our civil rights consciousness. Asian Americans came together and became a community, one with a voice. For Asian Americans, the death of a man was the birth of a movement.
Lily Chin, Vincent's mother, was an inspiration to many. Although she barely spoke English, she led a courageous effort to seek justice for her son. She became so disheartened, however, after the final verdict, that in September 1987, she returned to her native village in Guangzhou, China. There she remained until 2001, when illness forced her back to the United States for medical treatment. Lily Chin died on June 9, 2002, at the age of 82, in Farmington Hills, Michigan.
So thank you so much, everyone. If I could just have the cast come and stand up really quickly, I'm just going to introduce everyone who they played. So obviously we have Judge Denny Chin and Kathy Hirata Chin as our two lovely narrators and writers and just progenitors of this reenactment idea in general. Bruce Saperstein, played by Mike Yee, 3L. We had Judge Kaufman, played by our very own Professor Klarman. We had Ronald Ebens, played by Seth Berliner. Thank you, Seth. We had Theodore Merritt, played by Professor Mark Wu. David Lawson, played by Alice Wang, co-coordinator of this event. We have Judge Taylor, played by Dean Marcia Sells. Racine Caldwell, played by Leilani Doctor. Jimmy Choi, played by Peter Im. I played Frank Eamon. The court clerk, played by Amanda Chan. And the jury foreman, David Ascaraga. We had Liza Chan, played by Yishen Shen. And Gary Koivu, Marco Castanos. And Robert Starosky, played by Ming Chang. So thank you so much to all of our actors, our cast, and our narrators. So we'll have about a 15-minute Q&A, and we'll take as many questions as possible. And if you can raise your hand, and I'll come to you with a question. I think Judge Chin will first have a few remarks.
Let me just say a couple of words first to begin about the format and how we came about creating the program. The Asian American Bar Association of New York and Kathy and I have actually produced 10 scripts based on cases of importance to the Asian American community and others. So for 10 years, we have been doing this. This particular script was our second one. And we had a co-author who really helped a lot, and that is Frank Wu, a professor at Hastings, the former dean of Hastings, who's been working on a book on the Vincent Chin case for many years. But this gave him an opportunity to help us. And we've been doing these because, as I hope, as you've seen, these are wonderful teaching tools. We've learned so much from writing these. And then when we present them, we invite the audiences to get our scripts and to go back to their communities and present them. And we have presented these for the first time each year at the NAPABA National Convention. This case is our biggest hit, this script. It has been performed about 30 times all around the country. Earlier this year, Kathy and I were invited to go to Switzerland to do the Vincent Chin case. In fact, we had Judge Ann Williams of the 7th Circuit playing the prosecutor, and you had to be really careful when she started swinging the bat. I'm not going to go through all of the others, but we've done the trial of Minoru Yasui, which is an internment camp case. The trial of Tokyo Rose for treason during World War II. We've done Vietnamese fishermen suing the Ku Klux Klan in Houston in 1981. The Heart Mountain Draft Resistors has been a very popular script of ours. Individuals who were in the concentration camps and yet were drafted to fight for the United States. Albany has a website, reenactments.albany.org, and you can find descriptions of the first 9 of our scripts. The last one, Oyama versus California, which is the California alien land law, has not yet been posted. The 2nd Circuit has actually embarked on a civic engagement and education program. And it has a website for reenactments, which includes 2 of these scripts and some others that Kathy and I have worked on, as well as others. And that's you can find that at justiceforall.ca2.uscourts.gov. Justice for All on the 2nd Circuit website. And there, I think there are 6 scripts there. These are great teaching tools because the cases are of historical interest. As you can see, often there are issues that are still really important today. The Vincent Chin case, understandably, is really important because of the incidents of violence we've seen the last few years. In particular, the Heart Mountain one, the Yasui one, raise issues that are very much in play right now because of the administration's executive order. We also wanted to introduce these cases to a new generation of Asian Americans and others. You know, it's remarkable how many people have not heard of the Heart Mountain Draft Resistors or the Vincent Chin case. And so that's another reason that we are doing this.
Yeah. And we learn as well as we work through the research and writing these scripts. I am half Japanese. I had never heard the story of Heart Mountain until Denny challenged me to work with him on Heart Mountain script. I think my father would have been shocked that I ended up working on something about the draft resistors, because he was very traditional Japanese American, and he was inspired by the heroism of the fighting 442nd and not by the Japanese Americans who refused to fight. So we learn as well, and it's an opportunity for us to collaborate in a very professional manner, which is a lot of fun.
We spend our summer vacations working on the scripts and disagreeing with each other from time to time. With that, we will take questions. Anyone with any questions in the back? Yep, go ahead.
Thank you so much for bringing this reenactment to here. Oh, okay. Hi. Thank you so much for bringing the reenactment here. I think we all found it extremely evocative. Thank you so much. And I just had one question, which was, we've all talked about how this case has affected the Asian American community and the political aspects of the case, but to what extent do you think the result of the case, the retrial, and can be attributed to the justice system of this country and the legal system, especially with your experience as a federal judge, and not just to the political aspect of it?
Well, I don't think that the result was a result of politics. I mean, I think the result was the justice system working and not working well. The justice system did not work well in this case. The government conceded on appeal that the trial judge was wrong on the evidentiary point. Of course, the government made the objection in the first place. And it's one of those cases where the government regretted afterwards that it had made the objection. I mean, the hearsay objection was not well-founded, and the government did not even try to defend it. The question would be whether it was harmless error. There were some mistakes made, you know, ironically, perhaps the one political aspect of this that came into play was moving the case to Cincinnati, where you had a different kind of environment, a different kind of a jury perhaps that was not used to hearing civil rights cases. And that is one of the ironies, you know, that the Asian American community did well, came together, generated all this interest, and then that was a significant factor in moving the case. One of the remarkable things is that so many people were energized by this. This is before Twitter and social media, and you know, to gather a group for a demonstration, it had to be done the old-fashioned way by word of mouth. These days, you know, like that. The other day, I found myself in the midst of a demonstration, not because I was participating, but because I came out of the subway and suddenly there was this huge gathering. And so it's a different kind of a thing now. Another question? Yes, sir. I'll let you have the mic.
Yeah, thank
Sorry.
you.
Go ahead.
My name is Han. Thank you so much for bringing this. My question was, as the play mentions, a lot of the racial talk and civil rights conversations, you know, still happen on a very black versus white spectrum. Even within this play and the trial, you know, there's lynching mentioned, and there's, you know, the purpose of the law not being for Asian Americans mentioned. And I think, you know, just kind of moving forward, you know, keeping in mind, as the play also mentions, that culturally we come from a very different place, and of course our experiences are also very different as Asian Americans. What you think about kind of moving forward, keeping that relation in mind, and what can we learn from the other civil rights movements? What should we do differently?
Yeah. I mean, of course, this all happened 30 years ago. You know, and I think one of the themes of the conference is how we don't have many Asian Americans in leadership positions, in part because, you know, we have usually spoken with a softer voice. I think this case helped to change that. I mean, this case helped to energize people and bring people together. And so even though Mrs. Chin did not see justice for her son, I think a lot of good came from the case. You had the Sixth Circuit's ruling at a time when the law was uncertain, at a time when it was not clear whether the law went beyond black and white. And this case helps settle that, yes, indeed, it does go beyond black and white. I mean, these days, you would never have a sentencing without the prosecutors there. These days, victims have significant rights. They have the right to notice of criminal proceedings, and they have the right to be present. And those things did not exist back then. But again, you know, the Vincent Chin case helped create or lead to some of those rights. The whole notion of bias crimes is something that, you know, only has evolved in the decades since. So a lot of good came from the case, despite what might seem like an unfair result.
And as you saw, I mean, one of the issues in this case had to be the lawyering. This was a high-profile case, but it was a person just barely out of law school who had no experience in criminal proceedings who was trying to deal with these issues. That would not happen now. There are plenty of Asian American lawyers who are well-trained in these areas who would have waded in. But that was a very different world back then.
Yeah, and her heart was clearly in the right place. She was trying to help, but she did not have the tools to do it. You don't bring all your witnesses together into one room, coach them, and then record it.
And transcribe it.
There was a question over here. Yes.
Thank you, Judge, and to everybody involved in this wonderful production. I'm a native Detroiter. I spent more than 20 years of my life living in Detroit and had never heard of this case before today, which I think is a shame. So I'm curious if you've made particular efforts in putting on this production in and around Detroit, where I think it would have the most salience, perhaps.
Yeah, well, Frank Wu is from Detroit, and so he has a personal connection. I do not know of any production in Detroit. Switzerland, San Francisco, but not Detroit. So, I mean, if you have connections to the law school out there, a bar association out there, that might be a good thing to do. You know, I mentioned that we've done this production 30 times. The ABA has done it 2 or 3 times. Philadelphia Bar Association, Cleveland Bar Association. So majority bar associations are doing this, and that's one of the gratifying things. The timeliness of it, we did this last year in North Carolina, and it was just a few weeks after there had been a beating of a South Asian to death in a parking lot dispute. And the big question was it race or was it just a parking lot dispute? And we have parking lot disputes in New York City all the time, but you don't run into your home and bring out a shotgun and shoot someone, and that's what happened down there. And so it raises these really important issues that are still very timely.
But anyone can borrow these scripts. I mean, go on the website, get a group together, and put on a production. I mean, that was one of the reasons that we put these scripts together. They are teaching tools, and you know, all of you can get the message out.
Yes. One of our cast members.
Thank you, the both of you, for putting this on and bringing this here. I think it was a great experience for me to be a part of this. My question was, you mentioned this just a few minutes ago about one of the great ironies being the amount of community organizing that went into this case, and then how that contributed to the change of venue. I was wondering if you could comment on that a little bit more, and on, I guess, drawing from your experience and your professional opinion, if the change of venue was appropriate, and how that might play into similar cases and dynamics and crimes in the present day.
Yeah, you know, I never had one of these motions myself. They don't come up that often. I recall there being a case where when Rudy Giuliani was the U.S. attorney, there was a case that was transferred and was tried in New Haven. So it was one of the few times that the motion was granted. You know, interestingly, the trial judge denied the motion the first time around. And then the second time, she said that there was even more publicity. But I don't know. I mean, it's hard to put myself in her shoes. There was more publicity the second time, but I don't know that it really made that much difference. But that's what she did. I mean, these things that don't come up very often. They're obviously subject to the trial court's discretion. I don't think in 7 years I've had an appeal from such a motion, and the one that I do recall being granted is it was a corruption case. I think it was Stanley Friedman or something like that. I don't know if June remembers in the back, but and that case went up to New Haven, which is kind of an odd place, but. If you want to move a case from I didn't mean it that way. Kathy grew up in New Haven.
New Haven, sorry.
But if you have a case in Southern District of New York and Lower Manhattan, it does shift, I think, the dynamics to suddenly send it to some place like New Haven. And but it's the defendants making these requests because they feel they can't get a fair trial in the original venue. Anything else? In the back there, yes.
This is a very non-legal question. But I first want to thank you. I thought it was a wonderful experience. I'm so glad I was able to listen. What was the effect on labor leaders? I mean, did the case and all the publicity have any broader resonance in the labor community?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. You saw some of the slides initially. The atmosphere was one of hostility toward the Japanese car companies because of the competition, and most of you are way too young to remember, but in the early 80s, Detroit was hurting. I don't know if you remember, you may be too young too, but Detroit was hurting because of all the competition. And it was after that many of the Japanese car companies started, building factories in the United States so that that would relieve some of that. So the unions and the politicians were involved in the Japan bashing that we saw. And I think it certainly added to the tension. And the two defendants were auto workers. One was out of work. And that was all part of the dynamic here. Did things get better after this? I don't know. I guess I would be skeptical whether that dynamic improved. I think in time it improved because the economy improved. And as I said, the Japanese companies wanted to have more of a presence in the United States. But it also shows you that when things are tough economically, one has to be concerned about these kinds of hostilities arising. And if you go back to Asian American legal history from the 1800s, it was very much driven by competition. The prejudice was very much driven by competition. And many of the labor organizations were leading the charge in terms of the discrimination against the Chinese and then later the Japanese, because the Japanese became adept at farming and became a competition for labor. So it continues to be something to be concerned about.
I was just wondering if a case that's similar to the Vincent Chin case came up, I guess nowadays, and it was just happened to be assigned to, let's say, an Asian American judge like yourself. Do you think that would be it would be inappropriate for the judge to keep the case, or would the judge need to recuse him or herself? Or if the judge does not, then what do you think the public, or how the public would react?
I'm not sure whether you're asking me specifically,
I'm trying to be careful.
whether you're asking about another Asian American judge.
Or if like
well, we had a case in New York with sort of the opposite. Officer Liang was charged with manslaughter, and the judge assigned to the case was Denny Chin, a Korean American judge. I don't know how they assign cases in the state court system. I don't know whether that was a coincidence, whether it was purposeful. I'm not sure. I mean, that was a very difficult case for a judge to handle. You had the African American community outraged by another killing of an African American by a police officer. You had the Chinese community outraged because they felt that Officer Liang was being picked on. And there was Judge Chin trying to handle it, and I thought he handled it really, really well. There would be absolutely no reason for a judge to recuse herself because of race. We go back to Constance Baker Motley when a big New York City law firm in an employment, in a gender discrimination case, asked her to recuse herself because she was a woman. And Judge Motley said no, and the notion is ridiculous. You don't do that. I mean, if you're asking whether, if I got such a case, whether I would recuse myself because of my studying of the Vincent Chin case, I think the answer to that one is no, absolutely not. I mean, why would I be unfair just because I've studied some of these other cases? I did mention at lunchtime that I did have a lawyer once accuse me of being unfair because of race, and I wound up sanctioning him because, in my view, he was interfering with the administration of justice, and the Second Circuit affirmed my sanctions.
So it's really interesting to me because
Yes.
that sort of question we would never ask about, say, a white defendant and a white judge, whether a white judge should recuse himself. But in that vein, though, how do you think your identity informs the way that you are a judge?
We are picked for the bench because of who we are, for what our experiences are, hopefully for our good judgment. And it would be silly for us to leave that all behind the moment we took the bench. I get asked that question a lot about can I be fair in an immigration case, given that I'm an immigrant myself and my grandfather was an illegal alien. And the answer is no. It's not a basis for recusing myself. Now, if I stand up and make some kind of a comment that would show that I'm biased, then that would be a different story. But just the fact that my background should not disqualify me for anything. If justice is blind, why do we care about diversity on the bench? Why do we care about bringing on more diversity on the bench? And justice is blind, but I think it makes a big difference, not just in terms of appearances. I think the appearances matter, but I think it makes a big difference in terms of, substantively, in terms of our sensitivity to things, our understanding of things, empathy. And, I still do some district court work, and recently I sentenced a defendant, a Chinese defendant. He had been, I had sentenced him many years ago to a very strict sentence. I didn't have a choice back then, but I had sentenced him to a harsh sentence. The AUSA on the case was Preet Bharar, by the way. He was the AUSA, and then, law has evolved, and the government did the right thing and consented to vacating the conviction and to let me re-sentence him. So I had a chance to re-sentence him. And he wrote a letter, and one of the things he said to me was, I am ashamed to be in front of you because you are Chinese. And I just thought it was fascinating that it wasn't a question of, whether I was going to take it easy on him or whether I was going to be hard on him, but he felt more shame to be standing in front of a judge who happened to be Chinese. It was a really interesting dynamic. I did give him a much lower sentence. Any other questions?
If not,
Thank
thank
you very
you.
much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to everyone. And as Judge Chin mentioned, that you can get the scripts from Albany and explore all those websites. Can I just ask the cast to come up here for a photo? And thank you. Have a great night to everyone.